Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and warmest greetings. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you to the opening ceremony of Ipoh Pam PUO Architectural Heritage Inventory Student Workshop 2021. Yang berbahagia, Dato' Arkitek Zulhairi Muhammad Zain, Co-Chairman PAM Heritage and Conservation Committee. Yang berusaha, Encik Muhammad Azmi Zulkifli, Head of Department, Civil Engineering Department Politeknik Ungku Omar. Yang dihormati Arkitek Lam Shen Fei, Fei Arkitek. Yang dihormati Mr. Bong Wei Jian, MArch Graduate Universiti Malaya. Yang berbahagia, Datin Dr. Nur Hayati Hussein, Project Leader. Yang berusaha, Madam Ati Rosemary Muhammad Arifin, Project Coordinator. Mentors, Encik Irwan Jamaluddin, Ipoh City Council. Arkitek Zalina Abdul Aziz, University Sains Malaysia. Dr. Muhammad Jaki Mamat, University Sains Malaysia. Associate Professor Arkitek Mior Muhammad Farid, Universiti Putra Malaysia. Dr. Wan Srihani Wan Muhammad, Universiti Putra Malaysia. Encik Abdul Muluk Abdul Manan, Universiti Tunku Abdul Rahman. Committee members, participants and students from Polytechnic Ungku Omar PUO, Universiti Putra Malaysia UPM, Universiti Tunku Abdul Rahman Utah, and respected audiences. Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin, I invite all of you to pray for blessing in this afternoon's event. Dear Muslims, let us recite the Ummul Kitab Al-Fatihah. Ladies and gentlemen, Ipoh Pam PUO Architectural Heritage Inventory Student Workshop 2021 will be commencing from 5th November to 19 November 2021. The purpose of the workshop is to create awareness among students on the importance of recording architectural heritage through detailed inventory. This inventory will develop photographic documentation of architectural heritage in Ipoh for future reference and conservation purposes. The objective of this workshop is to collect and record information on the Ipoh architectural heritage. Dear audience, without further ado, I would like to invite and welcome Yang berbahagia Dato' Arkitek Zulhairi Muhammad Zain, Co-Chairman PAM Heritage and Conservation Committee, to deliver the opening remarks. With all due respect, please welcome Yang berbahagia Dato' Arkitek Zulhairi Muhammad Zain.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh, and a very good afternoon to all members of Tubuhan Arkitek and students of Polytechnic, mentors and mentees from Majlis Bandara Ipoh, Universiti Malaya, Universiti Sains Malaysia, Universiti Putra Malaysia, Universiti Tunku Abdul Rahman, distinguished guests, speakers, and all participants of PAM Polytechnic Ungku Omar Architectural Heritage Inventory Student Workshop 2021. Innovation in architecture is undoubtedly essential, but preserving and conserving the old heritage buildings and monuments is also vital, because those buildings are the reflection of our history. They help us to understand and respect people who live in different eras with different habits and traditions. The existence of old buildings and monuments will help us to observe the changes in the society for better understanding of the reasons that lead to the development of cities and communities, and even traditions in the current status. Old buildings are the face of town. They reflect the changes that happen in a town over time. They reflect conflicts, wars, and the prosperity of the society. They even reflect the economic condition of the city over time. A critical issue facing decision makers or the lawmakers, architects, and conservation professionals is accommodating change to heritage places and adding new layers to the historic urban environment in ways that recognize, interpret, and sustain their heritage values. Over the last decade, an intense debate has occurred regarding the appropriateness of contemporary architectural installation or insertion in historic urban areas. This debate has divided sectors of the architectural community, pitting architects against planners and developers. It has positioned conservationists as anti-development and anti-progress. Change, however, is unavoidable. Buildings, streetscapes, and urban areas evolve and change according to the needs of their residents. Therefore, it is fundamental to determine the role of modern architecture in contributing to this change in ways that conserve and celebrate the unique character and quality of the historic surroundings that communities have recognized as vital and wish to preserve for future generations. Historic areas typically exhibit a range of heritage values, such as cultural, social, historical, and architectural. Culturally, historic preservation is beneficial to the community as it helps keep communities beautiful, vibrant, and livable, and give people a share in their surroundings. It connects people with their past and with one another. History is a great educator, and coming to know the history of a community and the historical sites fosters an individual's sense of belonging and community pride. Old structures and historic spaces often present the human skill of history. Their design and construction tell us much about the cultures that created them and about the traditions and events from which our society grew. Historic preservation is a critical ingredient in stabilizing older communities and bringing citizens together. Historic buildings provide a sense of stability and a tangible link with the past that all can experience. PAM Heritage and Conservation Committee, also known as PAM HCC, have a great pleasure to present you with the Ipoh Architectural Heritage Inventory Workshop 2021, which objective is to create awareness among students of the importance of recording. That is, recording architectural heritage through photography. It is hoped that the inventory, which will be kept in the PAM Electronic Resource Center and accessible by architects, architectural students, and members of the public, be it locally or internationally, will provide a path for more comprehensive research, studies, and documentation of Ipoh heritage assets. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. With all the mandate given to me, I now declare the official opening of Tubuhan Architect Malaysia Polytechnic Unku Omar PAM PUO Architectural Heritage Inventory Student Workshop 2021. Thank you very much.
Thank you Yang Berbahagia Dato' Arkitek Zulhairi Muhammad Zain for the opening remarks conveyed. Ladies and gentlemen, next we would like to invite and welcome Yang Berusaha Encik Muhammad Azmi Zulkifli, Head of Department, Civil Engineering Department, Polytechnic Unku Omar, to deliver the welcoming speech. Please welcome Yang Berusaha Encik Muhammad Azmi Zulkifli.
On behalf of Polytechnic Unku Omar, It is my pleasure to welcome all the delegates and participants today for PAM, Pertubuhan Arkitek Malaysia, and Polytechnic Engku Omar Architecture Heritage Inventory Student Workshop 2021. I welcome all the eminent mentors and professionals for coming here to share their knowledge and vast experience with the student community. We are really proud to collaborate with Pertubuhan Arkitek Malaysia, PAM, as a co-host to organize this event. We hope that this workshop would help students to expand their understanding, knowledge, and awareness about the importance of recording architectural heritage through detailed inventory. In Polytechnic Engku Omar, this is our first program conduct since students are allowed coming to campus. Due to the COVID-19 that's still at large, we encourage our participants to stay safe and follow all SOP during this event in accordance with KKM guidelines. I would like to thank and acknowledge all working committee and support team who have worked hard to make this workshop happen. I request all delegates and participants to take part in all activities that have been scheduled. I wish everyone a successful and memorable events. That's all. Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Yang Berusaha Encik Muhammad Azmi Zulkifli for the welcoming speech. Dear audience, we would like to continue this ceremony with a gift exchange session between Pertubuhan Arkitek Malaysia and Polytechnic Engku Omar. Please welcome Encik Khairul Azmi Muhammad to deliver the gift to Dato' Arkitek Zulhairi Muhammad Zain as a token from Polytechnic Engku Omar to Pertubuhan Arkitek Malaysia. Next, please welcome Dato' Arkitek Zulhairi Muhammad Zain to deliver the gift to Encik Khairul Azmi Muhammad as a token from Pertubuhan Arkitek Malaysia to Polytechnic Engku Omar. Thank you, Dato'. To continue the event, we would like to invite and welcome our first speaker, Yang dihormati Arkitek Lam Sheng Fei from Fei Architect to deliver his lecture entitled Analyzing Ipoh Rich Culture Through Its Architecture. Architect Shen is a practicing architect with lecturing experience in Taylor's University, Utah, and UPM. Award-winning from Hazanah National's Design Residency 2019, British Council's Alumni 2020, RTF's PJ Top 45 Architects, and Fun Empire, one of Best Architect in Malaysia. Shen enjoys writing to document observations, consolidate ideas, and proposes design solutions for the existing and new found problem in the living environment. Shen leads Fei Architect and architecture practice that develop design solution and meaningful design to the needs of operation and client. Please welcome Architect Lam Shen Fei.
Thank you, MC Farhana, for the introductions. Now, I'm myself comes from Ipoh, and I would like to share a bit of what I understand Ipoh. I think the students now will be, in the next few days, will be going to the Ipoh Old Town area, and that I would like to share a bit of that. I would like to share screen now. Okay, now, analyzing Ipoh cultures through its architectures, to me, it's interesting because for those of the students who are from Ipoh, then you'll find that Ipoh itself, used to be the capital for Malaysia during the governments of Japanese, and they were using some of our administrative buildings, like for example, the St. Michael's schools, as administrative buildings for the governments of Malaysia. And so, with that, it comes to a lot of interesting storytellings. And I hope the students not just understands the Ipoh as just what you see now, for example, the concubine lanes, the tourism, but actually look back to at least 150 years ago. That's where the Ipoh town itself started. So with that, I would like to bring you to how it started. Then perhaps with this perspective will give you better understanding in your study in the next few days, documenting, recording infos of this Ipoh heritage. Now, this is one of the earliest paintings, so I don't think this is a photograph, paintings of this Ipoh in the 1870s. This was a postcard that was sent out, and this was fortunate enough to be shown. The Ginta River actually flows through in the middle of the Ipoh town. And with that, the establishment of Ipoh started with this timber houses with still standing next to the river, as this British kind of overlooks into the whole kampong. So that kind of formulates the understanding of Ipoh as a kampong, started in the early 1800s. And eventually, after 70 years, they developed into the Pekan Lama. I think this is where you see the Jalan Sultan Iskandar, you see the train stations over here, concubine stations, concubine lanes over at these areas. So Ipoh itself started being next to the river, being, working with the resources that have been there. So this is where, the shop houses were being developed, houses made from bricks instead of the timber that you see all over the sites. Currently, all this kampong area has been developed into modern housings. Hopefully, the students are familiar with Ipoh sites. Coming to 1920s, which is slightly modern, also British times, where then it further expand into the Pekan Baru areas, where Ipoh starting to grow out, from being a village into the bigger areas. And eventually the Ipoh town, as you will see here, is the Pekan Baru on the sites, and the Pekan Lama, which is originally here. And we will actually go more into the Pekan Lama areas where you see most of the traditional buildings are located. I'll be happy to share this to the students later, so that gives them a better understanding of what they are looking at, where they stand. For example, if you're in the kampong area, this has been around for at least 150 years. But if you're in the Pekan Lama areas, then you're looking at about history of 150 to about 100 years old. And if you're in the now Super Ginta, or the old McDonald's areas, which is the urban areas, then they tend to be about just 50 years old. So, this area becomes very interesting, this Pekan Lama, because they've gone through, 2 world wars, they've gone through Spanish flus, of course, they've gone through the COVID as well. So this becomes very interesting if you kind of go into research it and subsequently. So this is what we're looking at in terms of the satellites, where the river flows. Yeah, you got the Padang here, you got the library, Ipoh Library on this side, St. Michael's being the St. Michael's School being inside the core areas. This is received from the Majlis. So in terms of blending within these core areas, they are considered significant heritage areas. which we'll dig down into it later. See, Super Quinta itself, they are not considered as the core areas because they are modernized. They've been converted to UTC from a wet markets and from a shopping center. So it has been through many stages. So it does not fully consider as a truly heritage. But the focus area has been always on this core areas. But at the same time, they also focus on the outer ring areas that covers into Samtet schools over here, and the Perdana, the Menteri Besar houses over here. So this becomes very interesting as the birth of Ipoh town areas. Now, this is also for those students who are actually looking into drawing, understanding the back lanes. So this becomes interesting to really understand, the clusters of shop houses that were being developed, as well as the back lane. The back lane is where most of the services or most of the wise activities, or if not at night, people pee in this area. So, but nonetheless, it becomes very interesting because nowadays it becomes tourism areas where mural arts are being painted along this back lane. So you have to imagine this time passes as what you see now does not truly represent the past. So this is where I think it's important I share today here to let you understand that, the past is actually could be much more interesting depending on what you are documenting. So aside from that, I think students also need to understand the structure of Ipoh town areas. It's not just taking photographs, it's not about just making drawings, but understanding it from a bigger scale. The structures, as I was indicating on the top of the titles, the structures of the town as they develop, as you can see, the buildings tend to become bigger as they spread out, and it started very much into the townhouses, the commercial areas that's concentrated along these areas. If you remember the presentation slides before where this kampong started, then if you look back into here, the kampong no longer quite exists anymore. So they have been replaced by modern developments. However, the existings of the late 1800s are mainly still be seen in this area. So what that means is then that if you go to see the building itself, the bricks that were being used, the structure, the footing, the lifestyles of the people have been there for at least 150 years. And I'm sure things have changed, but this is where the students, I would think that this is the interesting part of this heritage, is that things changes a long time, and students were there to actually document and understand it, not just as a fixed time, but in a time frame of 150 years or 200 years old. Now, this is then what I'm trying to mention just now, the add-ons that were being done to the sites. This was photographed. This was actually taken quite high above the ground. As you can see, this is the, currently it's called the Jalan Sultan Iskandar, but currently now is the, it used to be called the Hugelo Streets. So in the C1930s, which is about 90 years ago, you can see the buildings right here, and the building still remains here. But of course, what you can see is the windows have changed, but the veranda way remains. It used to be much more busier. You can see that the interactions with the river, there wasn't much trees around, so maybe people were fishing around these areas. Now to the left, you see the Ipoh Park now being converted into bigger trees, most likely, for shelter purposes, but back in the days were very small trees, palm trees at the sides. As you can see, the hill in the background. Now this is also be seen at the background here. This house, some of the shop houses you will see in the next photo. Now this allows you to understand that this modern constructions that were being done next to the road. It used to be electric pillars connecting, bringing electricities into the town areas. You can see the two domes here, which is the train stations, which you can see later in my slides. So from this, you can actually tell a lot of changes have been done. You can see the driveway remains the same, about 4 lanes, and they still encourage people to take the walkway on the side. So this, to me, having considered it as 90 years ago, it's interesting. Now, this is the next photo. Basically, is the photo looking much into the background. And this was taken in 1910, again, where the buildings on the left remained empty, same as this. The windows has been converted from traditional windows of timber and longer, because that time they want to bring more lights into the interiors. Now has been converted into smaller windows. But you can see the pitch of the shop house remains. The shop layout remains. You see the veranda way over here, it remains. However, it's been added with advertisement, modern interpretations, aircon, compressors. So all this actually changes the whole heritage towns by itself. So students who, if you happen to be here in the next few days, I think it's good to actually look back into here and see some of those structures that you are seeing, the bricks that were being used are actually done in the early 1900s, or even back in the late 1800s. So it's a good comparisons to bring you back to the old times. Now this is where the Ipoh train stations, for those who arrive to Ipoh by the train stations. As you can see, most of the features are remaining, except for the parks are being, the trees that were used to be more palm trees. Now you can see frangipanis and more grass around the areas. But other than that, the building remains the same, at least 100 years ago. So that was amazing. I think you see the pitch roof over here, you still have that red pitch roof over here. So I think most of the features for this the train stations remains. You see the rotating columns over here, you can see that over here as well. So I think that was amazing. I think students will be delighted to see these comparisons. Now, some of those photos even dated back earlier before. This was one of the earliest photo found. It's also on the same Jalan Sultan Iskandar, but because the early houses most likely were built in timbers and with palm roof. And of course, those cannot be seen anymore. As you can see, slowly timber houses were slowly converted into brickworks, because again, they were more fire resistant, they were more hygienic because rats would eat through the timber. It was more prone to flooding, especially being next to the Kinta River. So a lot of houses eventually has been converted into bricks that was stronger against and weather against the natural environments. But nonetheless, you can see that the street width remains the same. And back in the days, there wasn't many trees being planted. So perhaps someone in the students can actually get to find the photos right here as a comparison of the past, 1894 to 2020. Now, I'll be delighted to see where this is based on the photo. Now, the third part, it's other than the features, other than the tangibles, I also want to bring you to the cultural influences, because as British were governing these areas, then they were also bringing into different cultures. It's not just about the British. I think it's a mix of cultures. Of course, they were bringing in the Indians, of course, Chinese businessmen, and of course, the Malaysians, all mingled around these areas that eventually transformed these areas into a mix of cultures, also a mix of architectural characters. And this is very interesting, where you get to compare, what kind of gaya bangunan, what kind of characters of the house, of the shop houses, as you walk around, whether it's a form of neoclassical, which is very British. So this most likely could be retail units or grand buildings that used to be in many years ago. Now you get to see some transitional. Basically, it's a mix of Chinese and the local weathers of and the idea of shops in the bottom and house above. And this is very much capturing the essence of the business end back in the days, where the idea of shop houses came about. And of course, the veranda way that created the comfort walkway between the shops. Of course, you have the modern houses, shop houses that comes potentially a bit later, that were built a bit higher. And you can see the aircon compressors are just filling up the facades. Now, the electives are a bit more interesting because maybe because they were doing businesses, they were doing very well, so they have budgets to actually, redo their buildings with ornaments and perhaps with meanings on the buildings to represent what they sell or representing their families. So this is then allowing you to actually compare. The Art Deco perhaps were influenced by the Western medias, the trendy times, past the past the neoclassical, and becoming more into, at that time, would be a contemporary architectural styles of Art Deco. Perhaps this is this is Hanchin Petsu, which is a leisure building. Or Art Deco, maybe this is associations. So that brings different purpose of different buildings, and of course the Art Deco as the cinemas, as well as jewelry shops. So they were more enlightening, they were more entertaining to be seen compared to the traditional neoclassical. So they are all being scattered around the area. So depending on where you are, you get to actually compare that kind of transitions or the developments or modernizations or conservations that's been done around the areas. And I've been fortunate enough to do 4 buildings around these areas, which I'll be happy to show you photos of it later. Now, other than the characters of the buildings, I think the building use is also important. Whether it's a form of cinemas, whether it's a form of business, groceries, selling cloth. We also have a bit of Little India around the area. So this basically showcases what's the current use of the Ipoh town shop houses areas, at least for the core zones established by the Ipoh Majlis local councils. So as you can see, most of them are commercial. Some of them, as you can see, are under educations. So flanking into the main, this is the high streets. This used to be the main streets into the Ipoh, where you get to see the Masjid Negeri as well as train stations over here. So this used to be the like Jalan Ampang of Ipoh. The main street, the main spine going into from the residential down to Bercham, where you are connected to the highway down into this area. This is the main spine that's been, where this is the bridge that were being built to bring these two neighborhood together. So for those who are actually going to heritage, this street, this bridge, it's the most important to be. Eventually, these are the subsequent developments that were developed later. But nonetheless, you can see most of them are focusing into commercials, a little bit on the educations, as well as health in terms of the clinics. So this becomes interesting to understand what's the use of the buildings. Aside from the use of the buildings, I think we also have to kind of get into the interiors of the buildings as well, because this basically hosts the activities of the inhabitants, whether it's a residence above, commercials below, atrium in the middle that could bring guests or customers through the space, or whether certain washing activities, kitchens at the back. Traditionally in Malacca or Penang as well, the daughters of the families are asked to stay at the attic of the house, because they were scared that they might run away and get married away. So daughters are used to be treasures. So they don't want them to get married off, or they want them to be selective, because of family arrangements. So usually the attics were used to be hosting the daughters on the rooftops, and then their sons and maybe their in-laws will stay at the first floor, and then the ground floors will be used for commercial activities. Now, this is where the most of the activities happens, as well as the back lane. So I will encourage the students to actually understand the building, not just the characters, not just their structures, that the interiors, the windows, they get to overlook into the activities as well as the front areas. Now, the other part of it is the heritage values, as you understand that there are certain buildings that are more significant than the others. So this is being developed by the local councils. to establish what actually is the first class, Bangunan Warisan Class 1 and Class 2. So the one in purple, if you get to actually observe the town halls, the courthouse, as well as the station, the train stations, those are Class A heritage buildings. The other buildings, such as the shop houses, they're under Class 2. So then you get to see they were being conserved in a more liberal way. But those that are in purple, they tend to have a lot more restrictions. I think some of our facilitators for the next few days have friends, and maybe some of the speakers in the next few days are one of the conservators for the buildings painted in purple right here. So as you can see, there were mainly the main Majlis buildings over here, as well as some of the key buildings here. Most likely the HSBC banks over here, that's considered as and Standard Chartered banks over here. The big corporate buildings are considered as Class A. The Class Bs and the Class Cs are scattered around the areas. Now, this is a good documentary for those who are actually going around in the next few days. This actually highlights the types of buildings, what kind of streets, when they were built, what kind of characters they were being developed, and those buildings with Class A heritage values will be under the Heritage Act. If not, if they're under Class 2, then they will be under the Local Authorities Planning Act. So that you can actually see that what kind of allowance are allowed in the Class A and Class Bs and where they are and when they were built as well. Some of them could be more than 100 years old. Some of them by estimations. So as you get to go through the different streets in the old town areas, you get to actually understand the different categories, different heights, as well as the different time period when they were being built. As well as this, I'll probably share with your facilitator, and the students get to actually use this for the next few days. So having said that, there's also now the new developments being done in the Ipoh areas. Now, the concubine lanes has been mostly converted these areas into mostly F&B cafe areas. The Little Indias has always been there, been running in these areas. Kinta Heights, this is where the apartments are being stationed here. So they get a lot of local residents living in these areas. Dewan Bandaraya is over here, as and this is mostly the modernized areas. So this is where the future development has converted a rather mixed developments of the past, if you can see the previous slides, of different cultures into zones, modernized zones of developments, focusing on its own cultures. But nonetheless, this is very normal because as development arises, similar to KL, population move out, new population move in, new use are being established within the areas where it become more tourism driven and less of commercials in terms of a business. So this whole Ipoh have gone through in the past 150 years from multiple stages from the simple timber buildings into brick buildings, into world wars, into Japanese governments, and eventually into a very tourist-driven areas where you have interesting hotels being set up as well. So that character slowly changes the heritage. So now one of the drawback of at this moment, Ipoh itself is not a UNESCO site. So there are slightly different regulations that governs the conservations of the Ipoh town. So this is where the students hopefully come in for the next few days to observe what has been added on, what has not been done. That's transformed Ipoh from 150 years ago from a timber kampong, Malay village Ipoh into a very, at this moment, it's a very rich, complex, full of histories, story to tell. And this is what makes the current Ipoh different also being the capital of Malaysia for 3 months, if not mistaken. And so you have always seen quite a number of changes. And so hopefully the students get to experience this and maybe perhaps also understand Ipoh in a different perspective. So hopefully students gain something out of my sharing today. I'll have to get back to the MC, Puan Farhana, to continue the sessions.
Thank you, Architect Lam Sheng Fei, for the talk. May what has been conveyed benefit us all. We will continue the event this evening with the second lecture entitled Photography Technique for Architectural Inventory that will be delivered by Yang Dihormati Mr. Bong Wei Jian, Master of Architecture graduate, University Malaya. Wei Jian is graduated with a master's degree in architecture at University Malaya in 2021. He is particularly interested in heritage architecture, community, and culture. In his master's degree, he published his heritage-related research at the CABE conference in April 2021. The primary method of his research used the technique known as thematic photograph analysis, which studies the variation of heritage shophouses across its style in a systematic process. The works of Wei Jian varied in scale and typology, from the master plan of a decades-old township in Fujian, China, to revitalizing a historical power district in Singapore. In 2018, he participated in the Field School Symposium and publication that focuses on the heritage, community, and architecture study in Ben Pantom, Bangkok, Thailand. Variation of the projects and contexts allow him to explore and learn from different cultures. With that, Wei Jian loves to capture the scenery of the place he visited. To Wei Jian, the beauty of architecture photography is not the perfectness of the building in a frame. It is about the scenery that frame the culture, people, and details of the structure. Photograph limits the field of view and frees the critical moment, embracing the story behind the architecture. Please welcome Mr. Bong Wei Jian.
Hi, okay, let me share the screen. First and foremost, thank you, MC. So hi and good evening to all of the participants. So before I start my presentation, I would like to thank to the organizer, Ipoh Pam and Pam POs for the opportunity allowing me to share something I'm quite passionate about, which is the photography and also architecture. So the topic I will be delivered today is actually creating the future archive. So I'm trying to show the relationship between architectural photography to create a building inventory and also archiving and memories for the future. So a brief introduction to myself. So people normally call me by Bong. So I just graduated recently. So I'm quite passionate about creating a photography archives and also heritage architecture. So I think MC have already introduced myself enough. So for this picture, right, this is the first picture I'm trying to show to all the audience. So the interesting fact of this picture is I found a documentary in the Days book by Edwin Weston. So it's actually the first photograph has been printed out, and it is actually how is it? It is actually a architectural photograph. So it can be dated back from the beginning of the photograph, where architecture is one of the things that people trying to take rather than solely a portrait. So then this will be the second photo that I think it is quite interesting. For the first one, right, you will see two people actually carrying the painting. So have you really noticed that there's actually a historical building behind the photo? So this is why Walter Benjamin, he says something which is everyone will notice that how much easier it is to hold of a painting more particularly a sculpture, than especially in architecture, in photography, than in reality. So this is how people try to convey the art in the visual presentation, which is in photography. We hardly can really bring, say, the building from point A to point B, right? It's already built, right? So this is photography is very important, where we try to send a message of what the architects design on the building and what it try to convey to the public. So the next one. So what is actually architecture photography? So unlike most general, I would say most general photography, in which horizontal lines and correction of keystone and parallax error, parallax distortion are secondary issue, architecture photography require a very disciplined workflow, understanding of the story, and a keen sense of design towards the intention of the architects, and how we represent it in the photography method. So I would divide this technique sharing into 3 sections, which is the first one is the pre-shooting, then during shooting, and also the post-production. So different from the other types of photography, right? Architectural photography require a very good schedule planning from the period you're visiting to the buildings, the weather, the season, the timing, especially the effect, the sun shadow properties. Then secondly will be on the research and the inventory of the building that you're trying to take the photo. So it'll be different if you want to take the photo from elevation perspective, or very detailed zoom in to a particular element of the buildings. Then the thirdly will be actually, do you really understand what equipment you're trying to use, and what is the property of the equipment that you're trying to use, and whether it is suitable for your types of photo you're trying to take. So the first one will be on the schedule, right? So schedule is something, like I mentioned before, because like maybe in Malaysia we don't really have much season, just raining and sunny day, so it won't affect so much on the color toning and also the ambient, but it affects the shadow. So for example, you're having a facade facing the west, then you go to take the photo in the early morning, so we'll be having a very bad condition, not to say bad, very not pleasant, where you have very strong backlight at the behind of the building. So this is what you are trying to study at before you go actually to the site, or even you can scout as much as many times as possible before you go to take photo on the actual day. Then the next one will be a research and inventory checklist. This is why I try to do every time I go to take certain architectural photography. This is also the checklist I use during my research. So it might not seem to be very critical, but when you go onto site, especially for example, like the one I highlighted here, which is the traffic and the park car. So my research I've done is actually located in Harris Street, Malacca. So, and I was lucky enough, the time when I went there, right, is actually during the FCO. So the picture I able to take, right, is mostly without a car parking along the roadside. So if you have a lot of car, especially the higher SUV or lorries, then you affect the photo you take, right? So it also affects how you analyze your photo. This is one of the reasons you need to have very good schedule planning and inventory checklist before you actually go to your site. Then this one, secondly will be on the understanding of your photography gear and your equipment. This is what we always take for granted, then we don't really understand what we are using and what we are trying to take advantage from our equipment. So this is my interpretation on the evolution of camera. So camera photography has very long history, dating back where it's exclusively for the upper class, right? Then slowly they become more common and more down to the public as camera evolve. I'm not sure whether it is appropriate to describe we are lucky as now we are in the digital era, which is beyond the 2000s. So the reason why I say, because I'm not sure we are so considered as lucky or unlucky, because like we have more tolerance to the error as we don't have the limit by the expensive film, right? So vice versa, this lead to the dilution of the intention and attention when we're taking a good photo. It's simply just point and shoot instead of real framing, and also a good effort to compose a very good photo and telling certain story. And for now, right, we know smartphone and camera system, they actually can take a very good photo. It doesn't really matter which one you go for. The major difference from using a smartphone and DSLR system will be first will be on your capital. Then secondly will be on your post-production. This is, I think, the biggest difference. And yeah, one more, it will be the weight. Yeah, that's it for me, and especially for the students. Then the equipment-wise, right? To me, I think what is a must during architectural photography is tripod. Remember to bring your tripod during your architectural photography. Yeah. Then I would like to discuss more on the similarity which both camera system and also your smartphone can do, which is the focal length and the field of view, the perspective plan, composition, shutter, and the motion. I won't discuss so much on the sensor, very technical part of the photography. Yeah, so let me go through. The first one will be on focal length and the effect. This is what we normally take it for granted. In public, common public will known by zoom in the terms, but more professionally we known as focal length. So you see the picture to the right, right, it's actually taken during summer 2018 when my internship in Shanghai. So you can see like this tower is called Oriental Tower, and you can see the distortion between these two tower is actually quite significant, and it is taken by two different types of lens. This is why when we do, for example, perspective, it doesn't really matter, but we do elevation study, the distortion will play a very significant difference towards this kind of photo. So this is the overall photo of when you're using an ultra wide angle. Then this one will be using a standard lens. I will show you in detail how the line converts and distort shortly. So this is focal length. So focal length is actually the field of view of your camera system or your lens, right, towards the surroundings. So from very ultra wide angle to standard or even super telephoto. This is, and the next one will be on the types of camera lens. So from just now, right? Just now is the more illustrative to visualize the angle, and this is how the actual lens that we have in common markets. But what I'm trying to discuss over here is actually the modern smartphone. They actually can take quite good photo, provided you don't use the digital zoom. You try to understand what is advertised on your smartphone on their camera system from ultra wide, and also telephoto. With this, right, you know your camera system, then you know how to use it in different scenarios, from taking an elevation, zoom in detail, and also the perspective. So this photo is actually taken from a smartphone, which is using the ultra wide camera system, right? So this is 30 mm equivalent in full frame system. So you can see, right, the line, they actually distort a bit if you can compare to the next photo. So the next photo will be on slightly more standard wide focal length. So you can see the distortion of the line will be slightly reduced as compared to the previous one. Then the next one will be on the 65 mm equivalent, which is more telephoto category. So you can see the vertical line, they are more vertical. This is where the focal length we normally use if we want to capture certain scale comparison or even elevations. This is the next one will be on the effect of the focal length. So you can see, right, the image to your left, to your right side. You can see the red color line, it illustrates how the difference from when you use the ultra wide focal length to a medium telephoto, the distortion of the line could be very obvious. So it depends on what types of effect you're trying to create, and you should know which type of lens you should use. It's not just simply zoom from the ultra wide to the to like typical we say like zoom 1 time, 2 times, or even 30 times like you get in a Huawei or a Samsung. Yeah. Then the next photo will be the just now I showed about the vertical distortion, right? Then this one will be on the horizontal line. Okay, so you see from the ultra wide, right, towards the telephoto from 18 mm to 85, right? You see how when you use ultra wide, right, your building will be slightly like you push away the building rather than they are perfectly in line with the horizontal and vertical line. So yeah, this is how we control our focal length and the lens system in our smartphone. So this I will show a few examples, including the lens I used during my visit to different places. So this one is actually taken in Vietnam. So you can see, right, this is use the standard wide angle lens. So you can see there's slightly tilted distortion towards the building structure. You can see like converts into the center, right? You can see the diagram to the right side. There's a illustration showing how the line distort and also converge. Then the next one, this one will be on Malacca. This one is taken in the River Cluj during Malacca. And you can see this is using the 40 mm, which is this is ultra wide, very wide. So you can see the building behind, the tall building behind is actually quite distorted. So this is not very, this is good for a perspective and to show an entire ambience, but it's not very a good example if you want to use it for scaling or even like elevation documentation. Then the next one will be on, this one will be also on slightly wider focal length. So you can see to the left, right, the building is slightly I would say elongated for more public terms. Then and this one is taken in Penang. So this one you are using a medium tele, the standard tele lens, which is normally we use for portraiture. Then you can see the Tokong, right? Their lines, they are quite perfectly in line vertically. So this is a few difference from using a wide lens to a slightly more standard zoom lens. Then this one is also a quite standard zoom, which is at 50 mm. So you can see the lines, they are perfectly straight, and also horizontal, they are horizontally perfect. So the next one will be slightly on when you want to capture something which is more in detail. Like this one, we're using like 135 mm, which is a telephoto territory. So you can see all the elements, they are more, how to say, they are not distorted, they are more compressed and not distorted as compared to the one we use, which is the ultra wide. And this one is another example to show when we want to take some very detailed photo and make sure all the lines are upright. Yeah. Then the next topic I will discuss, which is the perspective plan. This is normally how we take photo, right? We just take our phone and point and show. We don't really understand the relationship between the perspective plane, which is your subject plane and also your camera plane. So this is the relation between the subject and also your camera, and the effect will be the horizontal lines converging from a certain angle. So this is not ideal when you want to do elevation study and scale photo. So be aware of this. So when you want to take, wherever you want to take elevational photo, make sure your camera plane are parallel to your subjects. Then this is one of the effects when you take from the parallel plane to your subject, right? You can see all the lines, the horizontal line, they are horizontally perfect. Then this is when you take to a certain angle, then you can see there's a conversion of the lines and also the perspective, they are distorted. Okay. Then the next one, this one will be more on the perspective side rather than the elevation side. So yeah, composition, it doesn't really matter when you use DSLR or your smartphone. This is both devices that can achieve the effect can be achieved from both systems. The commonly will be a rule of third. So this is quite general and straightforward how we compose a photo in very novice level. And the next one will be on centralized symmetry, which is we try to create a symmetry between the left and the right, or even the above and the bottom. Then the second one, this one is the photo. As at first glance, right, you may notice these are two photos, but in fact, right, this is actually one photo, and they are asymmetrical, which is towards the left. You can see the trunk of the trees. Then towards the right, you can see actually the shadow from the tree. This is something interesting to present in the perspective manner. Then the third one, the the foreground interest and also your depth. This is slightly harder, I would say, to create using a smartphone system. But yeah, if you are using smartphone, the only way you want to create the focus and also the blur background, you need a telephoto lens. So you may double check if your smartphone system will have the lens. Then the next one will be frame within the frame. This is quite common in architectural photography, which is you can use like a certain frame, like the windows, the 5-foot walkway. So the arch within the 5-foot walkway to create the frame and framing something behind the frame. So this is also quite interesting how you present the photo. Then the next one will be, this one will be slightly on the I would say the slightly higher level side, which is using the leading line. The more complex of your leading line may not be very good in certain way that will cause some I would say create a blur understanding towards the public. So it's better to have very clean and very directional line in your photograph, so you can actually see what your leading line trying to lead people to. Then the next one will be diagonals and triangles. This is also quite interesting method that will take the photograph. So you can combine with the, I would say the rule of thirds. So this one is similar. It combines with rule of third and also some idea of the triangular framing. So it creates a different perspective of view when you presenting your architecture. Then this one also quite common, which is pattern, texture, and also repetition. This one especially on place like Marseilles Church or certain old school library, right? They have certain arch like this one. The repetition can be seen along the way. When you take the photograph, you try to I would say embrace the repetition and also to see how the patterns stack up, because until the end, architecture is still a form of arts, right? Then the next one will be the extension of the previous one, which is when you take pattern and geometry, right? When you have too many repetition, you may want to have certain breaking points to create a focal of the photo. Then the next one will be rules of odds. This one I think is quite interesting because we like to take something like 3 or 5. So this is applicable also in architectural photography. To maybe we want to focus like this photo, try to understand the screening of a certain building. Yeah. Then the next one will be on another composition method, which is fill the frame. This one is trying to fill out the frame with all the architectural lines, geometrical, and also pattern. Then the next one will be I would say the vice versa, or the opposite way of the previous, which is to embrace the negative space. When we take some photograph, we no need to, for example, to fully take out the frame, and also we try to leave more negative space to actually let the subject to stand out. Yeah. Then the next one will be on simplicity and minimalism. In terms of how you compose your photograph, you no need to have very complex background or very happening background to actually show your architecture. The simpler and the minimalist, the better. Then the next one will be on your viewpoint. You should change your viewpoint, like just now, architect Fei, he mentioned about different the height, the levels of you view the street, you'll find something interesting. For example, like this one, when you stand on the street, you cannot see even the roof pattern and also the roof eave, the roof structure underneath the building. When you go up a bit, this is like 7th floor, 8th floor next to the buildings, then you can see the formation of the roof. Then the last one, in terms of composition, will be the golden ratio. This is something I think quite hard and also not really encouraged at the novice level. Yeah. Then the next one will be on moment and also the shutter speed. This is something more towards the perspective rather than elevation photography. So shutter speed is actually how you freeze your motion, right? So the faster the shutter speed, the more you freeze the motion, and the slower there will be, the effect will be vice versa. So this one is one of the image that using a fast shutter speed, which is and the subject in the image will be quite static. Then the next one will be slow shutter speed, and you can see the movement and also the dynamic of the image. Then I was lucky enough, there's a people stand for there for 2 seconds, so he is still among the others. Then the actual day of shooting, right? First thing I would say is research and scouting. This is very important because all architecture structure has a story. Then get to know your first impression towards the architecture and what the architect's trying to tell about. Then decide wherever you want to take elevation or perspective, because they are highly dependent of the property of the lens and also the equipment that you use. Then, yeah, of course, you will need to zoom in for the detail to understand all the, for example, the joinery, the materials, and will be the reverse way of it, which is to zoom out and understand the context, because like architecture photography is not solely on buildings or the structure like I mentioned before. It's about the people and also the context next to it. Then, yeah, the next one, embrace the structure member, like I said, how you create the photography to, how you create the photo to represent the patterns, and also how the pattern relate to each other. Even you want to have subjects to break the pattern also, it depends on your creativity. Then, yeah, this is shoot at different eye level. Go to scout your site, understand the surrounding of your site, which building you can enter, whether it's legal or illegal, depends on how you do it, and also try to shoot on different level. Yeah, you'll see the difference between the eye level. Then the last one will be on the condition of different timing. The condition and also different timing. When you shoot in raining day or sunny day, or shoot in morning and evening, it's totally different. Yeah, especially you can research more on like golden hour, the blue hour. You can see the effect on the shadow and also overall toning of your photo. Then the last but not least, we'll be touching a bit on the post-production. Post-production is actually quite important in modern days, right? Because we use computer to actually fine-tune our photograph before we present to the public. So I would simply, I'll go through some more focus on the Lightroom. Because Lightroom, I think, is how we edit our photo. And Photoshop to me, right, is how actually I compile and document my photo. There's a difference between edit and also compile. I think most architectural students, they are quite familiar with Photoshop, so no issue for that one. So Lightroom will be more dedicated for the photographer and also the photo editing in more larger batch instead of one by one. So don't be afraid when you see Lightroom. So Lightroom is actually quite simple to use it. So I'll go through a few of the, I would say, like the toolbox. So give you a very quick view of how the effect they are trying to control. Then I show you the sample before I end my presentation. So this is very, the first one, which is the basic panel. So you need to understand your temperature, your tint, your exposure, your contrast, even your highlight shadow. You may play with it, then you'll see the effect, how it goes. Then the tone curve will be something more, I would say not the novice level, but you need some time to explore how it actually combine all the basic panel here, the understanding of basic panel towards this tone curve. Then you actually can see how the curve, right, each and every section, how it actually affect your the effect of your photo. Then the next one will be on the HSL, which is more on the color. This is how you control your hue, your saturation, and your luminance of a particular color in your photo. This is normally we try to do when we want to create a different presentation in terms of color. Then the next one will be on the sharpening of the detail, like how you sharpen your photo, and also how you reduce your noise in your photo. Because like some you take it in quite dark area, and you might need to have post process in your noise reduction. Then the next one, this is I put star on this section, which is transform, right? This is actually how you correct your perspective after you take certain photo, and also to ensure the line they are more aligned, and also for vertical they are vertical, and for horizontal they are horizontal. This is the panel you must look into, and also to play with it, and to correct your perspective and also your distortion. Then this is the sample I try to show to you. You can see the photo to your left is actually quite distorted. You can see it. And after some adjustment, you can see towards the right, your windows, your lines, they are more in straight rather than very distorted. Then the next one will be on effect. This one will be depends on individual, which is not very crucial in architectural photography. Yeah, this one I'm trying to show a comparison before you edit and after you edit. So the first one, you can see the detail underneath the roof, which is the structure. Yeah, after you edit, you can try to bring out all the detail and the element in the dark area. And the next one will be also something like this, which is you can see, right? The element in the dark area will be bring out when you try to edit your photo from the Lightroom. And this one will be on the shadow. And the reflection you can see on the water, right? The one toward before the edit will be more blurry, then towards the right one will be more highlighted and more sharp. And also, for example, like this photo, I don't want to have a lot of green, which is the tertiary color to me over this photo. So I try to reduce the greens, and also I want to direct your focus onto the church, which is in red color. This is the intention how we manipulate the reflection and also the color within a photo. Then the next one will be on something on a busy street. Then I was thinking that people may not be my intention in the street, so I try to reduce the color among the people, and also to highlight certain things that I think is quite interesting within this photo. Then the next one, this one is quite important, and also the one I keep mentioning, which is the perspective and also elevation. But before you edit, right, this is considerably a perspective, which is there's distortion, there's depth between the photo. After you know how you should control your perspective in Lightroom, you can manipulate from a perspective to a more elevation looks photo. So you can see the line I highlighted in white color. You can compare the line between these two photos, right? There's a different in terms of the verticality. Then the next one will be on Photoshop. Photoshop I won't touch much because I think due to the time limit as well. And Photoshop, firstly, like I said before, we are normally used for composition and some minor editing, which is because Photoshop we edit photo one by one, it's not by batch. Lightroom is actually came by batch. You can edit like 30, 50, even hundreds of photos at once. Then this is how we example for we lay out the photograph within a given frame. Then the next one will be how we do collage. This is actually one of the research I have done. I think will be quite relevant to all the students who are doing some research and also some workshop on the heritage street light. This is actually when we take photo, the line will be not like this upright. So this is how I edited in Lightroom and also composed using Photoshop to create a street collage of the heritage shop houses along this street, which is in Malacca, Helen Street, if you know that. Then the next one will be collage between photograph and also drawings. This is I used this method during my thesis, which is actually I cannot take, because due to the limit of the site, which is quite in a strong area, so some place is not cannot be accessed. So I need to scale it, the photo, and also to study the relation of the photo in terms of elevation, and also some photo will be on the Google Maps, and to scale it, then also to compare it together to do the elevation study. Yeah, this is how another usage of Photoshop to me. Yeah. So lastly, right? So to me, story is very essential to your photograph. Every single photograph, right? This one even very simple hostel in Bangkok. They're trying to create a story which is the line, the geometrical pattern. You will see on normal perspective, it will be quite boring. But you turn it into, like this one is towards the sky, and also can see the composition is actually a C shape, something like that. So we try to show something that's not typical view by our normal eye levels. So I think lastly, I will say thank you to the opportunity, and you may follow me on Instagram, also check on my portfolio. So I'll pass back this to the MC. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bong Wei Jian, for the talk. May what has been presented be a useful guide for all of us. Next, please welcome Yang Berusaha Madam Ati Rosemary Muhammad Arifin, Project Coordinator, to deliver the introduction to Ipoh Pam PUO inventory.
Thank you, Madam MC Nur Farhana, alias, for the introduction, and thank you everyone for being here today. I now like to start the introduction by playing a video. Garis Pixel. Let me start my introduction. First of all, allow me to introduce the entire team members and thanking them one by one. Dato' A.R. Zulkhairi Muhammad Zain, Co-Chairman, PAM Heritage and Conservation Committee. Encik Muhammad Azmi Zulkifli, Head Department, Civil Engineering Department, Polytechnic Engku Umar. Datin Dr. Nur Hayati Hussein, Project Leader, PAM PUO, Architectural Heritage Inventory, and myself as the Workshop Project Coordinator, A.T. Rosemary Muhammad Arifin. PAM Secretariat and Working Committee, Madam Zaina Tunisa Ahmaduddin, Miss Shafiqah Kamaruddin, Miss Nuril Ain Nur Azhar, Miss Afika Shahibuddin, and the Working Committee, Architect Wan Iskandar Zulkarnain, Datuk Wira Wan Samsudin, Mr. Chia Kok Soon, Miss Ng Wai Meng, Mr. Benson Woon, and Miss Azira Ali. Working Committee for PUO. Encik Khairul Azmi Muhammad, Encik Yusri Yunus, Madam Farhana Alias, Madam Nurul Hikmah Wan Mokhtar, Mr. Amiruddin Samsudin, Madam Junaidah Abu, Mr. Wan Ahmad Faizal Wan Abdullah, Madam Norizawati Yusuf. To mentors, I shall call one by one in alphabetical order. Please wave your hands to the device or your camera. Encik Abdul Muluk Abdul Manan, Encik Irwan Jamaluddin, Associate Professor Architect Mur Muhammad Farid, Dr. Muhammad Jaki Mamat, A.R. Zalina Abdul Aziz, and Dr. Wan Srihani Wan Muhammad. Greetings also to both our speakers for today, Architect Lam Shen Fei and Mr. Bong Wing Jian. And not forgetting our media partner for today, Garis Pixel. And a special thanks to all the awesome mentees made up of students from Polytechnic Engku Omar, UTAR and UPM who are presently available at Polytechnic Engku Omar right now in physical sense, and as well as those who are online. On the outset, let me say how delightful I am to see today have actually came. The committee members was challenged with the ongoing MCO. We had been having to postpone twice the dates of the workshop. We also took time to review the SOP as safety for all the mentors, mentees, and all involved are kept at bay. Today marks a very important milestone for the Conservation Committee, HCC, as this marks the second architectural inventory workshop. Pertubuhan Arkitek Malaysia, PAM, in collaboration with Polytechnic Engku Omar, Architectural Inventory Workshop 2021 will be held from today, November the 5th, until the 19th November 2021 in 3 main phases. The first workshop was organized together with Masiana and UTM. The workshop was held in PAM Centre Kuala Lumpur in July 2019. This workshop successfully collected 195 photographic documentations of modern architectural heritage in Kuala Lumpur along with his historical description. This inventory data is now available for reference at pamer.com. Now coming back to this year's workshop. Ipoh was selected for its rich assortment of heritage structure and architecture, which are still not well researched and documented. It came with great value when our partner, Polytechnic Engku Omar, which is also based in Ipoh, welcomed PEP's offer to collaborate. Tasks were made easier with our friends and committee members who are staff members of PUO, as all have eased the preliminary work conducted by our researcher too. This year's workshop will focus on 4 main zones, namely Zone 1, Pohon Ipoh, Zone 2, Kinta River, Zone 3, Tin City, and Zone 4, Heritage Trail. Each inventory group will be formed by mentors, mentees, and dedicated liaison officers who will help everyone along the way. You will be working together as an entity to collect data as well as to produce outcomes that will outline tomorrow's morning by Dr. Nurhayati, as she will brief everyone in detail on the methods and formats. The briefing will start tomorrow morning, so please come early. Cities in Malaysia are booming with construction development, and we constantly see many old buildings being torn down and replaced with new ones. We also witness many old buildings being left dilapidated over years. Thus, HCC took efforts to record as many heritage structure and buildings for the present and future generation to refer and know their existence. The purpose of this workshop is to create awareness among students who are mentees for this workshop on the importance of recording architectural heritage through architectural photography, desktop research, and interviews. The result of this workshop will be published online at pamer.com, and the physical exhibition will be displayed at PAM Center for 1 month commencing the 19th of November 2021, which is also the closing day for the workshop. As lead coordinator for this workshop, I hope that this workshop will succeed to fulfill its intended objective. I like to leave everyone with this. Alone, we can do very little. Together, we can do much more. For all the people involved with this workshop, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for all the efforts that has been made and will be made by all the mentors and 60 mentees and the rest of the team who will work together to make this event a great event. Terima kasih. Now I suppose it's time for a Q&A. I'm passing it back to the MC to moderate if there is any questions from the students regarding the short introduction that we have given just now. Back to you, Madam Farhana.
Thank you Yang Berusaha Madam Eti Rosemary Muhammad Arifin for the briefing delivered. So let us proceed with the Q&A session. Dear audience, attendees who have any questions are welcome to ask your questions.
You can ask in Malay, boleh berbahasa Melayu sekiranya malu berbahasa Inggeris. Ada kat chat ke?
Jika tak ada, mungkin saya tanyalah.
Go ahead.
Okay, ada marker tak untuk workshop ini?
Hi. Hello.
Hi, what?
Hi. What's really here? Hello. Sorry, I'm actually on the move. Tapi I just would like to ask, the actual briefing of what to do will be tomorrow ataupun I missed the actual briefing.
It's tomorrow. Yes, tomorrow morning.
Okay. And whatever that we need to prepare ourselves will be given tomorrow as well, right?
Say that again, Dr. Wan.
Whatever things that we need, I don't know, we need to prepare ourselves. Is there a list that we have to bring?
There's nothing to bring but your good self.
And of course the camera.
Yes, and good shoes to walk.
Good shoes, yes, definitely. Hat too.
Okay, hope that answers the questions. There was a question by architect Lam Fei. Go ahead, Lam Shen Fei.
Oh, I was just wondering, will there be any markah untuk workshop ini?
Oh, marks. No, it's just passion and lots of love.
Okay.
But they will be rewarded accordingly by honorarium. The students are awarded with honorarium for this task. I don't know in specific for polytechnic. Maybe Encik Khairul or Encik Yusri can answer that, because there are many polytechnic students. Maybe they have used this assignment as an academic assignment, but as far as we are concerned, it's not we don't provide marks, but we do provide them honorarium. But most definitely our intention is to share and foster the appreciation of heritage buildings.
Good. I think it would be great the students would keep note of not just the building, not just the heritage, but how the people use the buildings.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's tourism or vandalism. But most importantly, enjoy yourself. You know, really get yourself involved. It's not just going there, take lots of photos, but immerse yourself in this heritage. That's something hopefully you enjoy for the next few days.
That's great advice. I think, yes, I think a part of being a good architect is that you're able to observe how people behave on site, how people use spaces, and how the building has evolved over time. So those intangible values that that you won't be able to do elsewhere, but by being there in real life, it's really important. Thank you, Architect Shen Fei. Is there any questions? Adakah ada soalan daripada orang yang dalam bilik tu? Saya nampak macam ramai kat dalam bilik tu. Ada tulisan XXX pun banyak. So ada soalan? Jangan malu-malu, boleh ke hadapan. Macam mana kalau dia orang nak tanya soalan dalam bilik tu? Dia orang ada mic ke kat sana?
Yes, they have having a microphone inside the lecture theatre.
So yes, or anyone online, if you want to ask any other questions, you may do so either on live FB or as well as in the audience, in the auditorium. Ada seorang. Okay, silakan.
Nampak muka?
Tak, nampak badan. Okay, alright, we see you now.
Saya ada satu soalan.
Ya, nama, bagi nama.
Oh, nama saya Muhammad Akil Iman. Boleh panggil Akil. So, saya ada satu soalan about yang pasal kamera lens tadi tu.
Okay.
Benda tu kita macam untuk tangkap gambar untuk about building kan. Benda tu macam bukan relevan, macam perlu ke, wajib ke untuk kita tangkap. So, aku kurang jelas pasal lens tadi tu lah.
Oh, okay.
My question.
Okay, I think this is good for you to answer, Bong. Do you understand his question? Do you want me to translate that in English, or are you able to understand that?
Able to understand. If I'm not mistaken,
Okay.
he asking about the relevance of the types of lens when you take the photograph, right? So, like I said, if you use different types of lens, the effect on the perspective and also the distortion will be different. So for example, if you want to take something like the elevational study, which is you need scale in relation to the people and also the context surrounding it. If you use ultra wide angle, they will be distorted. So your line are not vertical. Then there will be an issue when you want to, to compare the scale and also the relevance of the verticality of the lines and also the horizontal lines when you want to override on CAD. Yeah, I hope I answer your questions.
Menjawab soalan tak?
Menjawab.
Okay, terima kasih. Ada soalan lain?
Any other questions? You can step forward.
Jangan malu.
Hi, Miss Ati, if you don't mind, I share an interesting fact to the students. So,
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. when you go to the site, right, this is my experience, you may look into the building closely, especially their layering on the walls. Then either the plastering layer or the painting layer, they will tell you the buildings roughly how many times they have been renovated. So the facade you've seen may not be the actual facade of the building itself. It may be renovated like twice or even 4 times, 5 times. So yeah, you study on that one, that will be very interesting. This is one of my what I found during my research and also the study during my degree. Yeah.
Ada soalan lain daripada rakan-rakan dalam dewan sana? Are you all clear with your mentee, siapa mentor anda?
Puan Nati, can I have can I ask a question on behalf of the student? Okay. This question is to Mr. Bong. Bong, eh? Okay, Bong, yeah. Normally, when we take photograph, you know, the file for one photo sometimes it goes very big, you know.
Yep.
So we try to maintain it at a certain size so that we can keep it, you know, or we can send it out through email, or we can minimize the usage of our storage, you know. So what is the right size or the minimum size that we should have, you know, for in terms of pixel or in terms of you know better lah, you know.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. To answer this question, like when you take photo, my suggestion will be to take as large format as possible because you may want to crop it afterwards. And when you try to save your final edition, so you may reduce like 3 to 4 megabytes per photo, there will be more than enough. But yeah, so when you take photo, take the largest possible. You may want to crop it. Yeah, this is my advice. I hope I answer your question, Dr. Zhu.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Bang.
Thank you.
Okay.
Ada soalan tak dalam FB Live ke, Garis Fitzel? Do we have any questions on FB Live? Or
no, we don't have any questions on FB Live for now.
Okay, great. Any more soalan dari mentee kat dalam Dewan?
There's a question in the chat.
Oh, okay. I'm Lucas from City University Petaling Jaya. Can any panelist explain about the converging contemporary architecture and historical architecture? Converging contemporary architecture and historical architecture. I think I'll pass this to Architect Lam Chen Fei for him to answer that question.
Okay, hi. Let me check. Hi, Lucas from City Universities. Okay, you're asking, explain the converging contemporary architectures. Now, contemporary to me, it's what it stands for is the architecture of the current time. So contemporary could be, 50 years ago, the contemporary of that architecture could be different. So to ask for whether there's a convergence, explain the convergence, I think there's no clear-cut line as to these changes or phases of architecture style. As the students tomorrow who will be going to the site, ambil gambar, so then they get to see a mix of it. It's almost like a project of changes. So I don't see there's a clear line of convergence, but there's a slow change of it. Back to you, Architect Ati.
Thank you. So there's also, if I may add to that, Lucas, is that there's also the adaptation of the local culture. So sometimes, even though architects do take in certain movements, but there are certain elements that that they sort of like, in addition to that, invent something that's of local taste and integrated with the local culture. And I think in terms of the convergence is also that you understand that through there's various decades of design development in architecture and building styles, and you will also understand that there's sometimes in the new or contemporary architecture there's also attempt to mimic or to borrow back elements or certain patterns or language that was in the former era, but being translated into a different into a contemporary sense of the sense. So I think that's my answer. Maybe other architects could also answer this question. Actually, maybe Dato Architect Zohairi or Datin Dr. Nohaiti, who could also chip in if they like.
If there's none, maybe I'll chip in.
Okay.
All right.
Go ahead.
Well, I was thinking, yes, you're right. Architect Ati was saying about its influence of multiple things. Now, especially as Malaysia has gone through the British government, Japanese governments, and now under the Majlis Bandar Raya Ipoh. So they regulate designs within the areas. There were previously no regulations. So a number of buildings were designed based on their preference, but now they were being regulated. So you tend to see there's also influence of commercial tourisms bringing in new crowds, and thus they allow mural paintings, they allow special lanes to be created. So that's also this convergence that you see based on the different lifestyle living requirements into the Ipoh areas. You know, hopefully that brings in different perspective of changes to the architecture, to the Ipoh town. Okay, back to you, Dato Architect Zuhairi. I think your mic is. Okay.
Okay. Lucas is from City University. So he's following us on Zoom or FB Live?
From Zoom.
Zoom. Okay, so he was talking about converging contemporary architecture and historical architecture. So, like I mentioned in the beginning, during the opening speech, about the insertion of the new architecture, modern architecture in between the historical buildings. So we have to be very, very careful. You know, we can't avoid it because sometimes we found in the area of the historical sites, there's a vacant land there. You know, so they have to do the infill buildings. So that infill building, they have to balance it, whether they will go if there is no a certain guidelines, you know, no clear guidelines. For example, if we see in Georgetown, there already a set of guidelines. That one because they are in a World Heritage Site, you know. So there's a guideline for infill building, for how you have to treat that buildings and all that. But in a place like in a city, for example, in Ipoh or in Alustar, where there's no it's not a World Heritage Sites, then we have to follow what's the current regulation by the city halls or by the local authority of that place, you know. But we have to be very, very careful so that we don't go rampantly add something new, you know. But we have to balance in it between contemporary architecture, merging or converging into the historical architecture. Yeah, so I think if we go to the site later for taking photograph and all that, I think they can better understand what we are trying to say here. You know? Yeah, I think that's a good question, and it was answered by Architect Shen Fei just now. I think that's already answered some of the point about converging between the old and the new. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's it, Panati.
Thank you, Dato'. Is there any other questions from the floor?
We have one question.
Yes, go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Alright, okay. My name is Anis Milia and I'm from Polytechnic Nkoma. So I want to ask the panels if there is any buildings that are destroyed or lost any battle, any heritage buildings that lost in battle and then destroyed. Like for example, I'm from Ampang, and then there is this heritage place called the Pekan Lama Ampang, and then they were having a battle. Is either if it's going to be destroyed to create the new highway, which is the Suka Highway, and then a part of that heritage building, which is the Pekan Lama Ampang, is actually destroyed just to make the highway. So I want to ask if there is any other building that go through the same thing. Thank you.
I'll start first. Thank you for the question, Anis. Most definitely, and it's just not in Malaysia or in Ampang. I think this is happening everywhere around the world, as like what Datuk said in his opening speech just now, is that when there's a transition or modernization or some urban development occurs in any cities or any suburban areas, we will find that many will take over existing site that has already a structure in it. In fact, if you see in Korea, for instance, South Korea, they demolish a lot of building by, major demolition, by bombing them in purpose to then build in a new housing or new office, and that's quite common because they've, in terms of real estate value, the land there is more precious, so they don't mind demolishing the old building in order for the new building to come in. But yes, there are, of course, sentimental values. There are, of course, historical values that the community, that the authorities and developers also need to be sensitive of. So there, I suppose, a good city management or heritage and conservation management has to have a balance. What actually needs to be really conserved and preserved, and what can be adaptive reuse, what can be renovated, and what can be exchanged for a new building. So there's a different, how do you say that, different levels of grades, I suppose, grading on the heritage. And yes, some countries takes their heritage and conservation to a very extreme. For instance, Italy. I give you an example, Anis. Italy, for them, conservation is even to the road code, the roadside curb. The curb by the roadside, tepi jalan tu, batu-batu tepi jalan pun dia orang nak conserve sampai ke tahap tu. Atau lamp post tepi jalan pun dia nak conserve sebab mereka sangat appreciate history value, sangat-sangat sentimental dan very passionate about the history sampai ke tahap tu. Jadi authority kalau nak tukar batu kat tepi jalan pun kena macam ada beberapa prosedur yang sangat ketat, dan kalau nak ganti kena ganti yang betul-betul batu yang sama daripada quarry yang sama, because they usually use granite for their road curve for the historical zones, so they will have to find the actual quarry where batu granite tu didapati untuk ganti balik biar sama dengan yang nak ditukar sampai ke tahap tu. So there's like an extremist, and there's also people places where I don't care at all. So there's always this tension between these polar ends, I suppose. Yeah, so I'm just going to stop here. Perhaps others can pitch in and also answer Anis' question. Dr. Yati, maybe you want to try and give some examples of some battles that has been won and lost in Malaysia on conservation?
Thank you for Naki, and also thank you for Anis to ask that question. All right, in terms of development, we could see that there have been many changes in cities around the world, and in Malaysia it's also happening likewise. So within that kind of context, that where we have to improve certain infrastructure and certain what we call support systems to the city, there have been a lot of consideration in terms of what needs to be retained and also what needs to be removed from the site. So what happened in Malaysia, it has been many unfortunate events that that we found that cities or towns, okay, has been demolished, and new development came into it, and now we have highways coming through small towns like a lot of places lah, and this is in the kampung Bandar Ampang kan, Bandar Ampang lama, and that's not only in but we see that even in Sungai Besi, and even in mana lagi ya, even in KL, in Petaling Street, there were used to be a lot of debate on what to do when we have the train coming into the city. But this is other things. I think that is why we are doing all this inventory. We are trying to record what we have, anticipating that cities are going to be changing in the future. We have to accept the practicality of development in our city. So rather than not having any records or not having any documentation of what we have in the past, and we lost everything about the history of our city. So that is why we are doing the inventory, try to gather as many information through photographs, through documentation, through going through records, old pictures and things like that. So that whatever happened to the city in the future, at least we could say that we have pictures of it, we have record of it, and that's all that we can do at this moment. You know, as a small initiative right now, to try to conserve the knowledge and understanding of how our city has grown throughout the history. So I miss, there are actually many cities that went through the same fate as what we saw in Kuala Lumpur, but that is how it is in the world. And if we don't do anything like what we are trying to do in Ipoh today, we might not know also what Ipoh looks like, you know, in the future. So I thank you again for those who are here to participate in the workshop. I think Puan Aki has done quite a good introduction to the exercise. But we will have more briefing tomorrow. We will talk about this workshop further in terms of the requirements and everything. So therefore, all the energies and all the interest that everyone has today could be retained, and we try to complete our workshop as successful as possible. All right, thank you.
Puan Ati, maybe can I give my examples to
Please do.
this Anis who was asking this. So if I could share screen. Okay, now if you can see these slides I was sharing just now, can everyone see these slides, right? Yes? Yes, okay. Now you see the infill here. They've already highlighted a number of areas that were demolished or due to its own structural failures. I actually went into the Google itself and I can quickly show you some really good examples. Like this, if, depending whether this can be entered, you can see at the back, this is along the Jalan Sultan Iskandar on the main street. Now, this is where you can see some of the demolished building at the back if you get to access it. So this, you can see a lot of good history at the side of the building. So this is a very good documentary. And, maybe, photos like this will get to tell you that this used to be a shop that sells clock, because this is clock or watches, So that is interesting to see. So if you then go back to here, you see there's this 6 block of demolished buildings. So I'll take you there. Wait. Okay, yes. Here, you see these 2 blocks were demolished for some reasons and been converted to murals. You can see the bricks that were used to be stacking on the side. Those are the history. You can see the flashing that were being developed. So they used to be shop lots here, but for some reason it has disappeared. And this becomes very interesting if you want to look into the history of the buildings from the site, because this is where you can see the skeletons and the layers, the dilapidations. This you can't see, but this, you can see the bricks were traditional bricks. They're no longer the original brick that you see from modern houses. They were usually a bit thinner, a bit longer. So hopefully you get to observe that the colors that were adopted were different as well. So hopefully you can use this as a basis to go around the Ipoh Old Town tomorrow to locate the demolished building. Anis. Back to you, Puan Ati.
Thank you, Architect Shin Fei, for that, and also Dr. Yati for the explanation and also your kind input on the matter. Is there any other questions? Okay, if there is none. Oh, Dato', okay, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Pati. I just want to add 2 things before we end the session. Okay, first thing, I just like to inform the students that whatever they are doing within these 2 weeks, documenting a heritage building in Ipoh, that will contribute to the archive, that what we already have, the heritage buildings, photos of Ipoh, and then whatever they are going to do in the next 2 weeks might be a reference in the next 50 years, maybe, or 100 years. We have seen architect Shen Fei just now showing us a photograph of 1902, 1930s, 1925, So those 70, 80 years old photograph is being used today, So no doubt, this the photograph that is going to take within the next 2 weeks will be in the archive, especially in a PAM Resource Center. and it might be used maybe in the next 80 years, 100 years, from now. So that will be a new generations of photograph being archived. And okay, another thing is that most of the students here, have learned on the photography technique as from Bong just now, from Mr. Bong. Okay, and then also they have seen lots of photograph on that was presented by architect Shen Fei. So I just want to inform that PAM, through Heritage Conservation Committee, we have the photo hunt, annual photo hunt event. Normally we will conduct it in March. Okay, so many of the students are from KL area, and some of them just from surrounding nearby, and they can go and take photograph of the building and present it, and then we will exhibit at PAM Center. So with this experience that they're going to have in the next 2 weeks, I think when we conduct the photo hunt, maybe they can join us, with the experience that they have. Because taking a normal photography is different from architectural photography, as shown by Mr. Bong just now. So we will inform all students and lecturers about our annual photo hunts. We have deferred for 2 years already because of the pandemic. So hopefully, inshallah, 2022, in April or in late March, we will have this photo hunt event. Okay, thank you. That's all for me.
Thank you, Architect Datuk Zulkhairi, for the input by your kind self. I suppose this ends the Q&A session, and unless there's a dire need for another one, but I don't see anyone raising their hands or anyone in the chat. So I'll then pass the session to the MC for today, Madam Nur Fahana.
Okay, thank you to the audience who giving the questions, and thank you again to Dato' Architect Zulkhairi, Datin Nur Hayati, the speakers, and Madam Eti Rosemary for answering the questions and giving the explanations. Okay, I will proceed to the next agenda. Next is a photo session with the invited guests, committee members, and participants. We would like to request that everyone switch on their cameras for this photo session.
All right, switch on the video and be ready. Is there any more that's going to switch on the video? Okay, I think we're good. Okay, get ready for the camera. 1, 2, 3. And one more. 1, 2, 3. With the tech team. 1, 2, 3. And the last one. 1, 2, 3. All right, thank you. Pass back to you, MC.
Before we adjourn, I, on behalf of the committee, would like to express our sincere gratitude and appreciation to all the attendees involved in making the opening ceremony Ipoh Pam PUO Architectural Heritage Inventory Student Workshop 2021 a smooth and successful event today. There is an announcement here. Mentor and mentees can meet afterward for discussion until 6 p.m. Inventory briefing and site visit will be held at 8:30 a.m. tomorrow morning at PUO. Please wear workshop t-shirt and be ready to do the activity, and transportation will be provided. We close our ceremony today by reciting Tasbih Kifarah and Surah Al-As. Until then, wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and thank you all.